Thank you so much to everyone who has decided to join our 2025 Business Impact Report webinar. I really appreciate you all. Today, we're going to be led through some slides by our president, James E. Lee. He's got some interesting facts and findings for you from our BIR. I also want to remind everyone that we will be sending out copies of the slides within 24 hours of this. So if you're wanting to see something additional that you didn't quite catch during this presentation, you will have access to them within 24 hours. And if you have any questions, if we're not able to get to your questions by the end, we do encourage you to email us at communications@idtheftcenter.org, but I'll say that again at the end. And without any further ado, I think I will introduce the man of the hour, Mr. James E. Lee. James, if you don't mind taking us away.
Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate everybody taking time today. This is our final report that we're going to issue in this year. And as you know, every year we have a series of signature reports. Most recently, we issued our consumer impact report, which looked at the effect of cyber attacks and data breaches, identity theft, fraud, and scams on individuals. Today, we're going to talk about those same issues, but what is the impact on small businesses? We used a definition of the U.S. Small Business Administration, so those are organizations anywhere from a single solopreneur all the way up to 500 employees. So, just a couple of housekeeping items. We obviously want to thank our supporter for this report, MyTech. They are in the business of helping reduce fraud, particularly in account setup and through identity verification and other tools. So we're very happy that MyTech has helped us bring this report to all of you today and when we publish it tomorrow. Now, Tim gave you a different email address. I'm going to give you another email address. So we know specifically that you're asking about the BIR. So if you have any questions today or later, send them to bir@idtheftcenter.org. You can also submit questions during the chat. We have an opportunity to answer them toward the end of this presentation. We'll certainly do that. But in the event we can't get to answering your questions today, we'll certainly answer them by email. So you'll get an answer to your questions. Okay, let's get into this report. So who do we survey? We had a little over 660 individuals who were either owners or executives at small businesses. Again, as we define them using the Small Business Administration definition. So you'll see here on the left side of the screen the way that it breaks out. Just about half of the respondents represent organizations that had 51 up to 500 employees. So that's just about half of the group. The other half of the cohort would be those who had 50 or fewer employees. So we have a good mix of organizations and sizes. From an industry perspective, we're only listing here the top five. You can see the full listing of the industries in the actual report. But financial services was the largest single grouping, followed by technology, manufacturing, retail, and professional services. That makes up a little over 70% of the total pool of industries that are represented in this survey. So the report highlights 5 areas, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, there's a lot more in the report than what we're going to be able to cover today, but there are 5 areas where we're going to talk about right now. First is cyber attacks are a near universal threat for small businesses. So over the last 2 years, we have kind of reached this level, and now it's a sort of an area of stasis of just slightly over 80% of small businesses have said they have experienced either a security breach, a data breach, or both. So within those 3 areas, the largest contingent is those people who have actually suffered both a security breach and a data breach. So 81% of organizations are been hit. That's over the last 2 years, almost exactly the same number. What is different in 2025 is we've seen a very significant jump in the number of organizations that only experienced a single data breach. That's a 10% point jump year over year. You also have a little bit of an increase in organizations that saw two breaches, about 2%, not quite 2.5%. But we've seen decreases in the number of organizations seeing three or more breaches. And the working theory about why that is this. The bad guys are shifting their tactics once again, in large part due to AI and some other tools that they're now able to use and be more efficient. So rather than focus intently as they have for the last, let's just say 5 years, focused intently on an organization at a time, they're now going back to a modified version of what we used to call spray and pray, where you just try to get as many organizations hit as fast as you can to get as much information as you can to be able to then turn around and monetize that. What we're seeing now is a new version of that, where we're still going for mass attacks, but now because of the efficiency of AI, they're more targeted. So they're able to actually hone in on organizations who meet the profile that they're looking for as a target, as opposed to just throwing everything they can against the wall to see what sticks. So we're seeing this transition. How's that playing out? Well, when we look at the organizations and the individuals who are committing these kinds of crimes, we were seeing a drop in the number of external threat actors and external threat actor groups. That's consistent with also what we're seeing in ransomware in the past year has gone down. Again, one reason is broader approach as opposed to a more narrow approach. Malicious insiders down. What is replacing all that, though, is for the first time, when we knew this day was coming, we just didn't know when, that we're now able to quantify how many attacks are actually the result of AI. And so, in this particular set of responses, 41% of the individuals and organizations said that they were the victim of an AI powered attack. So, that has gone from zero in 2024 to 41% in 2025. So we're now able to quantify that. That more than compensates for the drops in what we have seen in other areas. And we also know from our other work, particularly in data breaches, that we know that phishing is far more efficient today. We're seeing more security breaches as well as data breaches, as well as frauds and scam, all related to AI. This is one of the most significant findings of the report. For the first time, consumers are directly paying the cost of cybercrimes. So the losses are consistent year over year. So, a little bit more than 50% of the losses here are between 250 and $1 million. About half of these organizations represented have lost somewhere in that range. So only about a 1% increase in the actual dollar value loss year over year. But how they are paying for this is very different. When I say they, I'm talking about the businesses. So how are they actually managing these unbudgeted expenses? So traditionally, it has been cash reserves, it's been cyber insurance, and then a combination of either raising money, expense management, headcount reduction. This year, though, different. Cash reserves, still number one, but down from the previous year. Cyber insurance proceeds, down 10 percentage points from 2024, number two. Here, for the first time, we're seeing organizations saying that they have raised prices as a direct result of the cost associated with a security breach, a data breach, and the recovery from that event. So we're referring to that as a cyber tax because, in essence, that's what it is. Because they're raising prices across the board to cover for this, it is actually a shadow tax. It's the kind of thing that actually is going to fuel inflation. And in an economy and the economic environment where we are today, we don't need more things adding to inflation. This kind of price increases creates a drag on the general economy. It is especially burdensome for small businesses that are generating jobs. It impacts the individuals who work at those small businesses, as well as the individuals who are the patrons of those small businesses. It also creates an additional burden on consumers besides the obvious. So, the economic impact, prices go up to cover these costs, that impacts the customers, obviously. But this is also, it's a secondary impact because it's not only the fact that they are having to pay higher prices, but they had their data stolen in the first place at some point in a data breach. So you're actually having individuals in many cases victimized twice through the loss of their personal information, the misuse of that information, and now this cyber tax that is driving up prices because organizations have are at the point they have to add to their own revenue structure to be able to cover these costs. These are two related areas. So the confidence in cybersecurity preparedness has collapsed, and there is a disconnect between basic security and risk. So, what I mean by that is we have seen since the pandemic, so if we go back to 2020, 2021, we would see very high confidence levels among small business leadership about their ability to block, and if they can't block, then at least recover from a cyber attack, a data breach, or both. Very high numbers, in excess of 90%. Now, what we have seen in 1 year is a 18 percentage point drop in that confidence. So we're now saying that small business leaders believe they are not as prepared as they thought they were and what they once were. So that is a significant finding. Now you marry that with these findings, and it becomes clear that we have a dynamic where the small business organizations are being attacked by an increasing number of attacks, as well as the complexity of those attacks. And that is creating a large amount of uncertainty and doubt in their own minds about their ability to handle these. How how is that expressed? Well, one is we're seeing a decline in the adoption of something as basic as multi-factor authentication, MFA, which is one of the most effective ways of protecting your own business data as well as customer data. So we are seeing a year over year drop of 7% of organizations saying they're no longer using or have not adopted multi-factor authentication. When you look at that against, well, why might that be? There is a little bit of offset because 10% of organizations saying that they're now going to pass keys. They're adopting that technology, which means you don't actually need MFA if you have passkey technology. But that's only moving up 5 percentage points. We're 5% adoption last year, 10% adoption of this year. That does not, though, compensate for the fact that when you look at what organizations say they are doing as a result of being the victim of a cyber attack, the number of organizations saying they're deploying new security tools is down 15%, 15 percentage points. And overall staff training, which is one of the key areas to prevent various kinds of fraud and scams, as well as cyber attacks, staff training is down 11 percentage points year over year. So we're in this environment where we're actually moving backwards in terms of basic protections at a time when the attacks are becoming more sophisticated and in many cases more numerous, even if an organization is not being attacked multiple times. We've talked a lot about AI. I think there's a contractual obligation now that every conversation around technology must include something about AI. So here's what we talked about when we surveyed these small business leaders. the first thing that point out is it is in fact influencing the security plans of virtually all small business leaders. Uh, to some extent or another, it is influencing what are their planning? What are they trying to anticipate an attack? What are they trying to avoid falling victim to? And AI, in their eyes, is very influential and must be addressed. Very 51% there you can see very influential, 29% influential, 12% somewhat. Only 8% said, nah, it doesn't have anything to do with me. Now, just because they believe it's influential, just because these leaders believe that it is something they must address, it doesn't mean they like it. And you can see the quotes here on the screen. AI already lies. You can't trust a liar. I really don't trust AI at all. Or my favorite quote is, I choose not to be a cyber crash dummy. Um, they Organization leadership understands it is something they have to do, but they're not embracing it necessarily willingly. And we know that it is the root cause of an increasing number of attacks. So it is something that must be dealt with. Now, how you deal with it is also an area that's in a lot of flux. Now, we asked in our consumer impact report the same question that we asked small business leaders, and that is who should hold the primary responsibility for protecting people and organizations from AI-driven identity fraud? Okay. So you can see here on the right side of the screen how those three I can't talk today. Those three cohorts answer the question. So small business leaders believe that individual consumers are the most responsible group. General consumers don't necessarily disagree. There's about a 10%, 11% spread there, but it's still the number one. It is a number one answer for small business leaders, and it is one that general consumers generally agree with. But when you go to victims who are actually the people who are actually victims of these identity crimes and ask them that question, then that number falls to 3%. They don't believe that individual consumers should be the most responsible party. The technology companies that create the AI, where do they fall? Small business leaders, 31%, right behind individual consumers. So they believe consumers who are most responsible for protecting themselves. Right behind that are the people who make the AI products. General consumers, again, don't disagree. In fact, they actually more strongly believe that technology companies that create the tools should be the most responsible. So 32% versus small business leaders saying 31%. And then victims, only 8% said it should be the original manufacturers of these AI tools. When we're talking about the businesses who are actually using these tools, where is that responsibility? This is where you begin to see a little divergence between small business and general consumers. 14% of small businesses say that the business themselves should be most responsible. General consumers, a little bit higher, 22% say they should be. But again, victims, only 4% believe that it is the business that is most responsible. Government law enforcement, no surprise here. Small businesses don't think that is their responsibility. General consumers, about just a little less than 20% believe it is, but 11% of victims do. Here's where it's really interesting. Mix of the above. So from the small business perspective, they're telling us that only 16% of small businesses believe that it is actually a combination of the parties above that should be most responsible in protecting uh, people and organizations from AI-driven fraud. But when you go over to the far right, the people who have actually been victimized by AI-driven identity fraud or identity fraud in general, along with scams and identity theft, 73% believe it is a mixed set of responsibilities, that all of the parties are responsible to a degree. That's going to be one of the great debates of the coming year, is who is actually responsible for protecting both people and businesses when these AI tools are misused or when AI tools are created by professional or cyber criminal groups that are have malintent from the very beginning. Who's responsible for protecting people from those? So that is an ongoing question that we're going to have to wrestle with in the next year. So in the report, we do have some recommendations on what small businesses should be doing as we take a look at all of the findings of the report, the findings around um, best practices. We talk about multi-factor authentication, staff training, all those things where we're seeing a decline in deployment. We talk about why it is important that those basic blocking and tackling elements be in place. There's recommendations and resources that are available to help on page 14 of the report. There's a section on countering AI attacks that starts on page 17. And it really is built around three pillars. The organizations to be effective now and in the future, no matter the size, needs to have a culture of security. That's historically been only true of very large organizations because most small businesses didn't think they were big enough to be attacked. Well, now we know that's different. And so now we need to create that same culture of security in small businesses. There needs to be this mastery of fundamentals. We talked about multi-factor authentication. Even better, deploy passkey, because then that solves a multitude of other ills and reduces the amount of data that you're storing, which makes you a lot less interesting as a target for professional identity criminals. And then we also need to have this concept of prepare for a crisis. Small businesses may be doing that, but it tends to be a financial crisis. Maybe it's even a natural disaster or something of that nature. We need to add into that this concept of what if your data is stolen? What if your data is not available to you? What if all of your information about your customers, your employees is stolen? What do you do? Added into that level of business continuity planning into what you're doing is going to be vitally important going forward. And there's information about what to do and how to do that in this report as well. So here's the key takeaways from this report. It's not just an IT problem anymore. It's been very easy to just say, oh, that's an IT problem, or I'm too small. It's not. It is a systemic problem now when you have multiple years with 80% plus of organizations seeing at least one attack. Number two, cybercrime is driving inflation. Not all of it. It's not the driver of inflation, but it is a driver of inflation, and we need to address that. And we need to be very firm in the fact that it is a hidden tax on individuals and businesses. Um, we've moved into an era of a new form of the old spray and pray. It's just now more targeted because the bad guys have AI. They have more information to be specific about who it is they want to target and why, and using AI, how they can do that. We're seeing that reflected in the numbers here, and we're seeing it in anecdotal evidence and stories that we hear from individuals about how they were attacked. Far more efficient phishing attacks, far more believable websites, fake websites. Now, fake apps being built with AI. So the model of I can only attack one at a time and maybe through ransomware, maybe through some malware, that model is falling to the wayside. And we're back now to we're going to do things at scale and we're going to use AI to make it efficient. Primary threat is not your disgruntled employee anymore. It is AI powered attacks. And we have to have a different mindset of how we address that, as well as a different tool set than how we address AI driven attacks. And because we know that people are overwhelmed by these complex new threats, they're neglecting the basics of cybersecurity. And that's something that we also need to make sure that individual organizations have the tools they need to be able to protect their data, protect their customers, protect their business, and uh, do the things that can be most effective in protecting all of us from these kinds of very prolific, very aggressive, very organized identity criminals. And if I remember correctly, that takes us to this slide, which is I want to once again thank our friends at MyTech for supporting not just today's webinar, but this report to make sure that it is seen and distributed widely so we can help people understand what is happening in the small business world and what can be done to protect small businesses. Um, Again, if you have, I'm going to ask Tim if we have any questions here in a second. If you don't want to ask a question here in front of the group, by all means, you can send an email to BIR, Business Impact Report, at idtheftcenter.org, or you can send it to me at jamesprez at idtheftcenter.org. You'll get a full copy of the report. I'll be sent to you by email. And our next report will be our annual data breach report. That's going to be released on January 29th in 2026. Yeah, it's almost here. And I can tell you right now, it's going to be a barn burner. We are only we're less than 100 uh, less than 100 data breaches away from breaking the all-time record high, and we have a lot of month left. So we hope you'll join us for our webinar when that report is released in January. And with that, I'll thank you for your time and your attention, and always happy to answer any questions. And Tim, do we have anything we need to address today? If not, we'll send everybody on their way.
No questions from the class. Just reminding everyone one more time to email any of your questions at bir@idtheftcenter.org or jamesprez@idtheftcenter.org. We look forward to seeing them. And thank you so much, James, for a fantastic presentation.